I think Conway's goal in life is to destroy Harvey. He just.
She was America's favorite funny woman, graceful, fearless, untouchable. So when a director's tap-taped remark, or maybe a beloved co-star's jab, humiliated her on live TV, no one saw it coming. She smiled through the punchline, then waited decades to speak. What shattered her poise backstage, and finally pushed her to risk it all by calling it out? The answer reveals so much more than a joke gone wrong. Carol Burnett was the queen of comedy television. Week after week, she walked onto that stage with her signature ear tug, her brilliant smile, and a confidence that told viewers they were about to witness magic. To millions of fans, the chemistry between Carol and her co-stars, Harvey Korman and Tim Conway, looked effortless. Their timing was flawless, their banter seamless, and their sketches some of the most beloved in television history. Audiences believed they were watching a family at play, a family united by laughter. But behind that laughter, one moment proved that even in comedy's happiest home, cracks could appear. It started innocently enough. The cameras were rolling, the audience was roaring, and Carol was ready to deliver another night of legendary sketch comedy. Harvey Korman was her go-to partner, sharp, witty, and known for his ability to play pompous blowhards to perfection. Tim Conway, on the other hand, was the lovable wild card, constantly improvising lines so ridiculous that Carol and Harvey often broke character. Together, they formed a powerhouse trio. But there was one night when Harvey, perhaps frustrated or simply testing boundaries, took things too far. During rehearsal, or so the story goes, Harvey wasn't in the mood to play along. Instead of hitting his cues, he mocked Carol's direction in front of the cast and crew. His words weren't delivered as a playful rib. This time, they cut deep. He rolled his eyes, dismissed her idea, and muttered something under his breath that made Carol freeze. The laughter died. The room shifted. For the first time, Carol wasn't just the star of the show. She was the target of embarrassment on her own stage. Carol, ever the professional, didn't let the sting show in her eyes. She continued, she smiled, and she carried on with the grace that made her an icon. But those who were there that day felt the tension. This wasn't the usual playful sparring between Carol and Harvey. This wasn't Tim sneaking in an extra joke to make her laugh mid-sketch. This was different. This was personal. Carol had been shamed, and the one person she trusted most to stand by her side in comedy had crossed a line. That moment, brief as it was, cast a shadow over the glittering set of the Carol Burnett show. The cameras kept rolling. The audience never knew. But for Carol, the warmth of her comedy family suddenly felt a little colder. She had always been the glue that held her cast together, but what happens when the glue itself starts to crack? Because this wasn't just a one-off joke gone wrong. This moment marked the beginning of a deeper strain, one that would quietly simmer behind the curtain until years later, when Carol would finally decide to speak the truth. But if this was just the beginning, what exactly did Harvey say or do that pushed Carol Burnett to the edge of humiliation? The answer is even more shocking than fans could have imagined. Comedy thrives on timing, chemistry, and trust. Without trust, the laughs fall flat. And on that unforgettable day, Harvey Korman tested the very limits of trust between himself and Carol Burnett. The two had been partners in comedy for years, but during a live taping, something happened that the audience thought was just part of the show, when in reality, it struck Carol to the core. The sketch itself seemed harmless. Carol had the spotlight. Harvey was playing his usual role as the pompous character meant to set up her punchlines. But instead of sticking to the script, Harvey slipped in a jab, one that wasn't in rehearsal, wasn't approved, and wasn't funny to the one person it was aimed at. In front of the cameras, he mocked Carol's performance style, brushing her off as if she were the weakest link, rather than the star who made the show possible. It was quick, subtle, and cleverly disguised as humor. The audience laughed, but Carol? She felt humiliated. Those who knew Harvey say he could be moody, even difficult, and sometimes he didn't hide his frustrations well. Carol later admitted in interviews that Harvey could have a dark side, and there were moments when his sharp wit turned into something sharper, a blade disguised as a punchline. This was one of those moments. Carol, trying to keep the sketch alive, forced a laugh and powered forward. But everyone backstage could see it. This wasn't acting. Carol had been blindsided. Tim Conway, ever the prankster, had a knack for breaking Carol into laughter. But even he stayed silent this time. The air around the set had changed. The audience, oblivious, roared as though nothing was wrong. Yet backstage, a different truth simmered. Harvey had shamed the woman who gave him his biggest stage. It wasn't the kind of moment you could brush off as just a joke. Carol wasn't only the star, she was the leader, the boss, the heart of the show. For Harvey to undermine her in front of the cameras wasn't just disrespect, it was betrayal. And while Carol never let the mask slip in front of her fans, she carried that sting with her long after the taping ended. This was more than comedy gone wrong. It was a breach of trust that would test their friendship for years. But Carol wasn't going to let one cruel moment break her. Instead, she did what she always did best. She hid the pain behind her smile, at least for a while, because soon, even Carol's legendary professionalism would be pushed to its breaking point. And when it finally happened, she stunned everyone, including Harvey himself. Carol Burnett had built her reputation on grace under pressure. No matter what chaos unfolded on stage, whether Tim Conway was ad-libbing so wildly that even the cameramen couldn't keep it together, or Harvey Korman was cracking under his own laughter, Carol always kept the show afloat. But after Harvey's cutting remark, she found herself in a situation unlike anything she'd faced before. This wasn't a forgotten line or a botched prop. This was personal, and the entire room knew it. Instead of snapping back, Carol did what she had done her entire career. She maintained her composure. In that moment, her professionalism was almost superhuman. She stayed in character, delivered her lines, and closed the sketch without the audience ever realizing that something ugly had just happened. From the outside, it looked like another perfectly polished segment of the Carol Burnett show. But behind Carol's calm expression, she was reeling. The truth is, Carol Burnett was more than just the star. She was the boss. She had hired Harvey. She had fought for the creative freedom that allowed her co-stars to thrive. She had given them the space to shine. So for Harvey to turn on her in such a public, humiliating way was not just a low blow. It was a slap at the very foundation of their working relationship. Yet, even then, Carol refused to let ego or anger derail the show. What people didn't see was the battle raging inside her. Part of her wanted to call Harvey out right there, to stop the show and demand respect. Another part of her, ever the leader, knew that doing so would shatter the illusion of unity the audience loved so much. She chose the harder path, silence. A silence that protected the show, but weighed on her like a stone. This wasn't the first time Carol had swallowed her pride for the sake of the bigger picture. Throughout her career, she endured criticism, backhanded compliments, and the pressure of being a woman in charge during a male-dominated era of television. She had always taken the high road, always chosen laughter over confrontation. But even legends have limits, and this incident pushed her dangerously close to hers. By the time the cameras stopped rolling, the tension backstage was thick. Carol, ever the professional, didn't let her fury explode, but her eyes told a different story. She was hurt, disappointed, and, for the first time in their years of friendship, questioning whether Harvey truly respected her. Still, she said nothing. At least not then. She buried the pain, carried on with rehearsals, and smiled for the press. But like a crack in glass, the damage had been done. And no matter how much she tried to hide it, that silence would not last forever. Because eventually, Carol Burnett, the woman who laughed through everything, would finally reach the moment where she could no longer laugh it off. On screen, everything looked perfect. Carol Burnett was dazzling in her gowns, Harvey Korman was sharp in his delivery, and Tim Conway was still the mischievous wildcard who could reduce the entire cast to tears of laughter. Viewers at home never suspected a thing. But behind the curtain, there was a chill in the air that no laugh track could disguise. Carol and Harvey continued to work side by side, sketch after sketch, but something had shifted. Carol, who once felt completely at ease with Harvey, now carried an invisible weight whenever they shared the stage. She didn't stop being professional. If anything, she doubled down on it. Her timing remained flawless, her smile never wavered, and her comedic instincts were as sharp as ever. But her laughter, the genuine kind that once flowed so easily with Harvey, now came with effort. Other cast members noticed. Tim Conway, usually the jester who could diffuse any tension with a well-placed gag, sensed that things weren't the same. Crew members whispered about the bad mood Harvey sometimes brought with him, about how Carol seemed quieter when he was around. The set, once an unshakable playground of joy, had moments of unease. It wasn't constant, it wasn't a war, but the hurt lingered, and everyone who worked closely with Carol could feel it. The audience, blissfully unaware, only saw the highlights. They saw Carol and Harvey bickering in character, trading lines, and bursting into laughter. They thought it was all part of the act, and in many ways, it was. Carol was determined not to let personal pain bleed into the work. Her show was a sanctuary for millions of viewers, and she refused to let them see the cracks forming behind the scenes. But while Carol was laughing on stage, off-stage, she was silent. Silent about the sting of Harvey's words. Silent about the embarrassment she had swallowed whole. Silent about the fact that she felt betrayed by a man she had championed for years. That silence wasn't weakness, it was protection. She protected the show, the cast, and the illusion that everything was just as perfect as it seemed. But in doing so, she carried the burden alone. And as months turned into years, that silence became heavier. Each time Carol brushed off another dismissive comment, each time she ignored the eye rolls or the backstage sulks, the weight grew. She never lashed out, never showed her cards. But deep inside, she knew that one day she would have to confront the truth. Because the truth was this: no amount of laughter could erase the pain of being shamed in front of your own audience. And as Carol held on to her silence, the question became, how long could she keep it in before it finally broke free? The answer came much later, in a moment no one saw coming. And when Carol finally revealed what had been hidden for so long, it shocked even the people who thought they knew her best. For years, Carol Burnett carried the moment like a scar no one could see. She never spoke of it in interviews, never let it leak to tabloids, and never allowed it to tarnish the joyful image of the Carol Burnett Show. To the world, she was untouchable, quick, radiant, and always in control. But privately, she kept the sting of that humiliation buried. In the 1970s, television stars weren't just performers, they were icons. Carol knew that exposing Harvey's behavior could shatter the illusion of harmony that made her show a phenomenon. And beyond that, she didn't want to destroy him. She had defended Harvey when others doubted him, stood by him through his moods, and still loved him as a performer and friend. So she kept silent. But silence is heavy. Each time a fan praised their perfect chemistry, Carol smiled while carrying the truth no one else knew. Sometimes she admitted Harvey could be difficult, but she never revealed the depth of how deeply he had hurt her. Not yet. Decades later, long after the show ended, Carol finally broke that silence. In a candid interview, she revealed that one of her most beloved co-stars had once humiliated her so badly that it left a permanent mark. Fans were stunned. How could the woman who never stopped laughing hide such pain for so long? As Carol explained, it wasn't about revenge, it was about release. Speaking out was a form of closure, a way to let go of the burden she had carried alone. But the real surprise wasn't the confession itself. It was the way she described the moment she finally reached her breaking point. And that revelation turned the story upside down. It took decades, but eventually, Carol Burnett decided she could no longer carry the silence. In an interview years after the Carol Burnett Show ended, she peeled back the curtain on her carefully guarded memory. With her trademark poise, she admitted that her beloved co-star, Harvey Korman, had once humiliated her so deeply that she nearly snapped. And for the first time, she told the world exactly how she handled it. According to Carol, Harvey had slipped into a streak of arrogance on set. He wasn't just difficult, he was flat-out disrespectful. He ignored cues, dismissed her notes, and rolled his eyes in front of cast and crew. At first, Carol did what she always did. She brushed it off. But after one especially cruel moment during rehearsal, she finally reached her breaking point. She stopped the room cold, looked directly at Harvey, and gave him an ultimatum. Her words were calm, but sharp as glass. Carol told him he could shape up or get out. If he didn't respect her, if he couldn't give the show and the cast his full commitment, then he had no place on her stage. For a moment, the set went silent. Harvey, usually quick with a comeback, was stunned. This wasn't the Carol who always laughed things off. This was the Carol who had built the show from the ground up, and she was done being humiliated. The effect was immediate. Harvey, caught off guard, reportedly left the set in a storm of wounded pride. Some versions of the story even say he walked out entirely, disappearing for a day before Carol personally tracked him down. When she found him, she didn't coddle him. She reminded him of the opportunity he had, the family they had built, and the respect she deserved. And in that moment, Harvey backed down. He returned to the show humbled, knowing that Carol's patience had limits, and he had just slammed headfirst into them. Years later, when Carol retold the story, she didn't lace it with bitterness. In fact, she described Harvey as one of her dearest friends, someone whose genius she admired until the very end. But she also made it clear, even the strongest bonds can fray when respect is missing. And sometimes, the only way to save a friendship is to confront the wound head-on. When audiences first heard this revelation, they were floored. For decades, they had believed Carol and Harvey's on-screen chemistry was effortless. To learn that it had nearly imploded behind the scenes only made their performances more astonishing. Carol had carried the show not just with talent, but with leadership, patience, and the courage to demand the respect she deserved. But the story doesn't end there, because once Carol spoke her truth, it raised a much bigger question. How did that confrontation change her relationship with Harvey? And what lasting effect did it leave on the woman who had always been the heart of the laughter? That clash with Harvey Korman left a mark that lasted long after the rehearsal ended. For Carol, it was both a relief and a reckoning. She had finally drawn a line, showing even the most patient leader has limits. But it also forced her to face the painful truth that the man audiences saw as her comedy partner had nearly broken her trust. In the short term, the confrontation worked. Harvey apologized, returned humbled, and their partnership steadied. It was never quite the same, but it survived. Carol knew now that harmony sometimes required confrontation, and Harvey knew she would never tolerate that kind of disrespect again. Emotionally, though, Carol carried the scar. Conflict wasn't in her nature, but by speaking up, she found a strange catharsis. For once, she wasn't just the smiling star, she was human, standing up for herself. Ironically, the fallout only strengthened the show. Some say the creative tension gave their sketches a sharper edge. Carol's courage didn't just save their working relationship, it elevated it. Years later, when she revealed the story, fans were stunned but inspired. The woman who had brought joy to millions admitted she too had endured hurt and humiliation. And by the time Harvey passed in 2008, she had long forgiven him, remembering him with love rather than bitterness. The lesson endured. Even legends must demand respect. Even icons must speak out. And when the laughter fades, what remains isn't just the comedy. It's the truth and strength behind it. When people remember Carol Burnett, they think of the laughter, the ear tug, the dazzling gowns, and sketches that became television history. But behind the comedy lies something deeper, a legacy of strength. Her clash with Harvey Korman wasn't just backstage drama, it was proof of what it means to endure humiliation and rise above it with dignity. She could have let that moment define her. She could have gone public, let bitterness take over. Instead, she chose patience in the moment, confrontation when it was needed, and forgiveness in the years that followed. That balance, grace mixed with resolve, is why she still stands as one of entertainment's most respected figures. When she revealed the truth decades later, it wasn't gossip, it was honesty. She showed fans that even legends face shadows, and that sharing them can be just as powerful as sharing laughter. To younger performers, her story became a lesson. Boundaries matter, respect matters, and confrontation doesn't always destroy, it can heal. The Carol Burnett show may be long over, but its echo lives on. Not just in reruns or trophies, but in the strength Carol showed when the cameras were off. That painful moment became part of her story, but never the end. Instead, it highlighted her humanity. making her triumphs shine even brighter. In the end, Carol Burnett's legacy isn't just laughter, it's courage, resilience, and truth. She proved that sometimes the funniest person in the room is also the strongest. And even when the applause fades, her voice will never be silenced.